Good afternoon. I would like to call the meeting of the Assembly Committee on Revenue to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine, De Silva, Flanagan, Gallant, Goulding, Gray, Hafen, Wynn, O'Neill, Roth, Chair Backus.
I am present, and please mark, I think it's just Assembly Member Hafen present when he arrives. Thank you. I would like to welcome those here in Carson City as well as those in Las Vegas and those attending by the internet. I apologize for our late start, but for those that are presenting today, especially those that may provide public comment at the end of our hearing by telephone, we would just ask that you spell and state your name slowly just to provide assistance for those here in Carson City. Likewise, those that are presenting today, just remember to state your name for the record. We would greatly appreciate that. Today on the agenda, we have an overview presentation by the Cannabis Compliance Board and the Department of Taxation on cannabis taxes. I would like to ask the presenters from the Cannabis Compliance Board to make their way to the table. And Mr. Hum, whenever you are ready and your team's ready, please feel free to begin.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm James Hum, James-Humm, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board. Joining me here today, I have our Chief of Administration, Steve Gilbert, our Chief of Health and Safety, Kara Cronkite, and our Chief of Investigations, Dave Staley. This is my fifth one of these presentations, and I will repeat what I've said in each one of the previous ones. Whatever measure of success I will have in this appointment will be because of them and their incredible teams who serve the state with dedication and unrivaled efficiency. Quick background on myself and the agency. Governor Lombardo named me to lead the CCB in December of 2023, whereas in the prior 6 years I had the pleasure of serving the state in various roles at both the Attorney General's Office and the Governor's Office of Economic Development. During my 14 months at the agency, we have already, and I know we will continue to accomplish many more great things. Now with that, let me walk you through the presentation. Apologies for a few of you. I know this may be a duplicate run through. Timeline of Nevada's cannabis program. The Cannabis Compliance Board was established through Assembly Bill 533, then the Cannabis Compliance Board consists of 5 board members appointed by the governor. AB 533 also created the 12-person Cannabis Advisory Commission to study cannabis-related topics and make recommendations to the CCB. In 2000, Nevadans voted to legalize medical use. In 2015, the first medical marijuana establishment opened. In 2016, voters approved ballot question 2, legalizing adult use, also known as recreational use. In 2017, recreational sales began in Nevada. The state's cannabis program at that time transitioned from the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to the Department of Taxation. In 2019, Governor Sisolak signed AB 533, as noted before, creating the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board, the CCB, which is modeled after the Nevada Gaming Control Board. In 2020, the state's cannabis program transitioned from the DOT to the CCB. Our mission statement. So this is our overriding philosophy for the agency. The Nevada Cannabis Compliance Board governs Nevada's cannabis industry through strict regulation of all areas of its licensing and operations, protecting the public health and safety of our citizens and visitors while holding cannabis licensees to the highest ethical standards. CCB board duties and responsibilities. CCB, as noted before, consists of 5 board members appointed by the governor. We hold regular monthly public board meetings. We host ad hoc regulatory workshops. We review and approve final licensures, transfers of interest, management services agreements, and the like. We approve the service of disciplinary actions such as complaints, and we act as the final arbiter of discipline and have final approval regarding subsequent settlement agreements. The board also may hold emergency board meetings to consider urgent matters such as summary suspensions. The CAC, which is the Cannabis Advisory Commission, is tasked with studying issues related to the cannabis industry and making policy and regulatory recommendations to the CCB. The 12-member commission is chaired by myself, the Cannabis Compliance Board Executive Director. It includes 8 representatives appointed by the governor with expertise related to the cannabis industry. In addition, the Nevada Attorney General, the Director of the Department of Public Safety, and the Executive Director, who is also in the room, of the Department of Taxation. Currently, we have 3 subcommittees, one on rescheduling and descheduling, which I'll mention later on, one on market participation, and one on public safety and the illicit market. The CAC meets at my discretion, at the discretion of the Executive Director of the CCB, similar to the Nevada Gaming Policy Committee. Who are we? So we have 3 main divisions: licensing division, an inspection and audit division, which covers health and safety, and an investigations and enforcement division. Our licensing division processes and reviews license and renewal applications and collects all fees associated with those. Licensing also manages cannabis agent registration cards. Currently, there are about 20,000 plus active cards and about 14,500 plus individuals. Also assists the Department of Taxation in collecting cannabis-related taxes from licensees. Our inspection and audit division performs audits and inspection of cannabis facilities. They track and monitor all inventory from seed to sale and audit monthly and quarterly reports from licensees required by the CCB. And they evaluate all complaints made against the licensed facility, including incident reports. Our investigations and enforcement division reviews and processes transfers of interest for change of ownership requests, vets potential licensees and affiliated owners, officers, and board members, and this review also includes a full suite of background checks and financial analyses as part of a required suitability review. They also partner with local and state law enforcement regarding criminal investigations, including enforcement on illicit market activity. We have 6 different types of facilities or licenses. Cultivation, these licensees are licensed to grow, harvest, and package cannabis and to sell cannabis to cannabis establishments, but not directly to consumers. Our production facilities are licensed to purchase cannabis, manufacture, process, and package cannabis and cannabis products, and to sell to other cannabis establishments, but not directly to consumers. Our retail or dispensaries, as you've probably heard, these licensees are allowed to purchase cannabis and cannabis products from other cannabis establishments, and these are the ones that actually sell to consumers. We additionally oversee testing labs, and these licensees are allowed to conduct laboratory tests on cannabis and cannabis products. Distribution license, cut that one short, allows for the transportation of cannabis. And our newest license type, consumption lounges, these are licensed to operate businesses for the consumption of single-use or ready-to-consume cannabis products on site. Next, you'll see taxable sales as well as excise tax and state retail tax. As you can see from the gray in the tables, taxable sales reported by adult use retail stores and medical dispensaries in fiscal year 24 were 829 plus million. That is a decrease of 2% compared to fiscal year 2023. Additionally, $43.7 million were collected for the 15% excise tax in fiscal year 2024. $76.8 million were collected for the 10% state retail tax in 2024. And as with any industry, the market will ultimately dictate demand. Our goal at the agency is to provide certainty and to create a fair playing field for the industry to know what's expected of them and to provide stability to withstand any economic downturns. Distributions to the State Education Fund in FY24, $107.8 million was distributed to the State Education Fund. As noted before, the retail tax of that was $76.8. The wholesale tax was $31 million. NRS 372A 290 directs all revenue from the 10% state retail cannabis excise tax into the State Education Fund, which formerly was called the Distributive School Account. State wholesale cannabis excise tax revenue collected is transferred to the CCB and used to support the agency's operations and the regulatory oversight of the cannabis industry in Nevada. CCB also distributes a total of $5 million of the revenue collected from wholesale excise tax to local governments to carry out the provisions of NRS 678C and D. The remaining proceeds are transferred to the State Education Fund by the CCB, along with residuals from civil penalties, licensing, and other fees collected as outlined in statute. The Nevada Department of Education is then responsible for distributions from the State Education Fund to the school districts. Industry snapshot. So currently, there's 387 total medical and adult use operational licenses statewide. As you would guess, the highest concentration of operational licenses is in Southern Nevada. There's 260 operational licenses in Clark, unincorporated Clark, Las Vegas, North Las Vegas, Henderson, and Mesquite. As you would also imagine, the second highest density is in Washoe. There are 62 operational licenses in Washoe, unincorporated Washoe, Reno, and Sparks. Breakdown of our license types: 128 cultivators, 100 producers, 8 independent testing labs, 103 medical dispensaries or retail cannabis stores, 46 distribution facilities, and 2 consumption lounges. Quick industry snapshot. Pursuant to NRS 678B 390 and 340, cost of an agent card is $150 per category, and each card is valid for 2 years. Each category of the 6 that I just mentioned, or outside of labs, 5 of the 6 I just mentioned, cultivation, production, distribution, dispensary, all 6, lab and consumption lounges require separate cards at $150 each. CCB receives an average of 1,012 agent card applications monthly. CCB issues an average of 902 temporary agent cards monthly, allowing Nevadans to enter or continue work in the industry. These cards are issued all pending a state and FBI background check, and an applicant can expect to receive a temporary agent card within 48 hours, which we're also very proud of the turnaround time and the volume we're able to process. Laws and regulations. All the rules and regulations governing the CCB can be found on the CCB's website under the Laws and Regulations tab. This page includes Title 56 NRS 678A through D, as well as the Nevada Cannabis Compliance Regulations. The NCCRs are soon to be NACs, and those are broken down by regulation. Current and trending challenges. As noted before, tax revenue in FY24 is down compared to both FY23 and 22. Thus, obviously, sales revenue is down in FY24 compared to both FY23 and 22. This decline is consistent with sales trends in other states with mature cannabis markets and can be attributed, at least in part, to after effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. This slight downward trend is consistent with the 15% wholesale excise and 10% retail excise taxes. Additional trending challenges: the illicit market, as well as nationwide concerns regarding synthetic cannabinoids. Cannabis market study contracted by the CCB estimates the illicit market size at $242 million, or about 21% of the total cannabis market in Nevada. You may have heard of intoxicating hemp, synthetics, or Delta-8 THC. National concern is growing over these products, which are often sold in smoke shops and gas stations, but do please note these are not currently regulated by the CCB. These are products also of note that are over the allowable legal limit for hemp. Agency operations and efficiencies. We did a licensing round out in White Pine County. 1 cultivation and 1 production license have been issued. Happy to report that the winners of those licenses have just received their final inspection and are slated for opening very soon. We're very proud of that too. It's the second licensing round in agency history of those license types that the CCB has conducted. Cannabis consumption lounges are expected to continue to open on a rolling basis. As noted prior, 2 are currently open. Mobile Lab. In 2024, the CCB acquired and enlisted mobile labs to test edibles, plants, concentrates, and infused products in the field. Results take about 15 minutes, and light labs have already been used to assist law enforcement across the state. And as noted before, market study, the CCB commissioned an independent market study as required by NRS 678A 310. Agency operations and efficiencies, governor's initiatives, economic growth. We strive to create a business-friendly regulatory environment. Public safety, we plan on partnering with DPS on illicit market concerns. Government support services, recruiting and retention of a talented team, providing outstanding customer service, collaborating with other state agencies, including tax, DPS, Department of Agriculture. Office organization, the new supervisory positions approved by the legislature in 2023 in the audit, inspection, and investigations divisions improved efficiencies within their divisions. staff training and improvement. In the interim, the CCB team received numerous trainings and utilized resources inside and outside the agency, leveraged trainings from other state agencies, and provided numerous trainings to licensees and industry stakeholders. Recruiting and retention, CCB is a desirable place to work, creating an innovative and forward-looking agency, and we're exceptionally proud of our current vacancy rate of only 1%. Audit inspection, also super proud of this. Our teams have completed all field work and 100% of licensees were visited in 2024. Regulatory updates, the board, as dictated by the governor's executive order, considered multiple regulation changes which were workshopped and approved in June of 2024. Bill implementations from last session. SB 195 revamped the provisions relating to disciplinary action taken by the board, including the settlement process for any complaints. It limited civil penalties to a max of $20,000 for any single violation. Fees also eliminated time and effort billing for audit and inspection. SB 328, CCB is no longer exempt from the Administrative Procedures Act. LCB is currently revising the Nevada NCCR's Nevada Cannabis Compliance Regulations into the NIC format, as well as all regulatory changes submitted in June of 2024. Board composition also addressed that, the terms of office, qualifications, and training of board members, as well as the executive director appointment. CCB has welcomed 2 new members since I assumed my role, one in January of 2024, and another new member actually started this month. His first meeting was on February 20th, and he successfully went through all of the training as required by SB 328. SB 277, this required the CAC to provide a study and recommendations concerning the potential effects on the Nevada cannabis industry if cannabis were to be removed from Schedule I of the UCC Act or the Federal Controlled Substances Act. That report was submitted on February 29th, 2024 to the LCB. Addressed dual licensing, CCB combined licenses for both medical and adult use, creating one fee for license renewal. Subsequently, all licenses have been combined. Individual sale amount increases, notices were sent to industry, and adjustments made to the tracking and inventory systems. Excluded felonies, this required the board to develop and implement a process by which a person who has been convicted of an excluded felony offense may submit to the board a petition for an exemption from those prohibitions. 9 have been submitted in total, 4 were approved without conditions, 3 were approved with conditions, 1 did not respond, and 1 has not brought requested documents that were requested during the meeting back to the board. Issuance and renewal fees, this decreased the maximum amount of the fees the CCB is authorized to charge for the issuance of renewal of an adult use cannabis establishment license. Secure entrances. Lastly, this authorizes any cannabis establishment to have more than one entrance so long as each entrance is secure. And finally, our bill, we have AB 76, which obviously revises provisions relating to cannabis. We had the honor of presenting in front of Chair Miller on the 12th in Assembly Judiciary. We worked with industry and key stakeholders to bring forward what I believe to be a pretty substantive amendment. We will continue to do so after that hearing as we got a couple additional comments on that bill. And we hope to continue to work that bill through the process as that's a run the agency type bill. So with that, Chair, thank you for indulging me, and I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Hum, for turning it back over to me. With that, committee members, do we have any questions for our Cannabis Compliance Board? We'll start with Assembly Member Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. So I remember last session, you were not the director, by the way, and there was a very interesting, he was very proud of this, that he had said that he had done about $8 million in fines, and then it also cost about $8 million to run his department. So I'm curious, how many fines have you imposed in total, and what is your overall budget at this point in time?
If you can get, James Hum for the record. Chair, do you mind if I go direct? Assemblymember Gallant, thank you for the question. If you can give me just one moment, I actually have those numbers for you.
Okay. Oh, good. I asked a question they had to look at.
It might take us a little bit too long, but ballpark numbers for 2023 and 2024, again, tail end, sorry, James Hunt for the record, tail end of 2023, when I came in, we did 9 complaints. One of those was, a couple of those were trailing. In 2024, we also did 9 complaints. I don't know the 8 million, but I do know that what I was able to kind of piece together was those dropped from 1.2 million to about 400,000 in, thank you, I have them. So in 2023, we did, so in 2022, we did 33 complaint actions for 1.2 million, rounding up a little bit. In 2023, we did 9 actions for 400,000. In 2024, 9 actions for 120,000. But again, those numbers, there may be a few trailing from 2024, so that number may change. Current budget runs about 11.8 million, Chief Gilbert, is that accurate? 11.8 million. So no, we would not be covering our costs from civil penalties.
Thank you very much. That's very encouraging.
Next, we'll go to Vice Chair Considine.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question. You were talking about partnering with DPS on the illicit market. I'm assuming there's multiple different focus points, but is one of them sort of the deliveries on the strip properties, or are you looking more about sort of local area illegal grows?
Thank you for the question. All of the, James Hunt for the record, all of the above. So still working through that with DPS. I know some other additional ideas have been floated throughout the session. Again, currently we don't have too much authority, but we're able to go out with local licensing jurisdictions to pull products off the shelves that are over the legal limit. So that's been one focus. Kudos to our Chief of Investigation, Mr. Staley, who's been able to kind of trumpet up that program, if you will. The locals have been great to work with on that throughout the entire state. So yes, those are all pieces that we were going to be discussing with Director Tagliati, as well as others, again, throughout the state. I know that, this has been front of mind for us. Significant number of meetings and roundtables we've held on the illicit market over the 14 months that I've been here. Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with just some questions. Looking at slide 12, I had a question regarding the agent cards. I see that about 1,012 agent cards applications are monthly, and right before it, there's multiple categories for agent cards. Are you seeing when people are applying for agent cards that they have to submit multiple applications for the different areas, or is it usually like singularly people individually being that 1,012 members?
Thank you for the question, Assembly Member. Steve Gilbert for the record. We do see a lot of multiple applications for different types. So cultivation, production, a lot of employees will work in a cultivation or production because they are connected, as well as a cultivation, production, and dispensary. That's a vertically integrated facility where they would need one of each card to work in that facility. So yes, we do see quite a few.
And when that happens, are your investigators having to do additional work, or is it if they apply at the same time period for the 3 different types of agent cards that it's pretty much they're cleared, it kind of works across the board for each of them?
Thank you for the question, Steve Gilbert. So it would be one application, and they could apply for each category on that application, and it would include one background check. So the amount of work to process the 3 applications is just a little bit more than it would for the 1 or 2.
Thank you for that. Members, do we have any other questions for our Cannabis Compliance Board? I think because you've probably done such a good job the 5 times that you've presented today. Oh, hold on. We have Assemblymember Flanagan.
Just one really quick question, and thank you for the presentation. In terms of the licenses that are distributed, can you talk about the diversity of those who are in the industry and getting licensed, so we can get a sense of what our community population looks like, if it's reflective of who's licensed and who's operating?
Thank you for the question, Assembly Member. I don't actually have the percentage of licenses, but I do have our demographics report that I can send to you. Would that be better?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
I will get that over to you. Thank you, Assembly Member.
And with that respect to that demographics report, I assume that's for license holders, right? Okay, fantastic. And we will go to Assemblymember Gray.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but just a thank you, so to speak. I've been to, well, I'll use Oklahoma as an example. They basically have a dispensary on every corner, and they are a state that only allows medicinal use. And comparing what they've got to what we've got, you guys are obviously doing a good job, and you can tell that there's a lot of shady stuff going on behind those doors and not here. Thank you.
Chair, just a quick follow-up. I believe the demographics report is actually in the biennial report we sent over to you. I'm just trying to find the page so I can direct you over to that. Sorry. It's a very robust report, but in an effort to save time, I will step away if you want to switch to Department of Tax, and I can get you that information pretty quickly.
I did have one quick question that I wanted to elaborate on, because I believe from last session and this session, one of the challenges that you've indicated continues for the CCB is the illicit market. In understanding, illicit market may be people distributing without a license per se on the distributing side. Are you also seeing or having an understanding that there's also like an illicit market that may be occurring like on the wholesale, maybe interstate, other challenges that you may be seeing? If you could expand on like the illicit market that you guys were talking about.
Yes, thank you for the question, Chair. Specifics as for like interstate commerce, I think, or interstate on the illicit side, I think I'd have to defer to DPS or the locals on that. But just kind of similar to kind of my previous answer was, it's kind of all of the above. So if there's local grows that, again, there was, I think, some news coverage before we were able to assist on a local grow with that light lab that I had kind of mentioned. So it's kind of coming from all angles. So again, that's why this has been front of mind. And then in conversations with the governor's office and Director Tagliati, this is something we really want to take a look at and see what we can do to partner, not just with DPS, but also the locals as well as with industry to really tackle it and see what we can do.
Thank you so much for that. And in your wonderful, well-done biennial report, I found the agent diversity, like what type of people hold agent cards at page 7. And me too, I couldn't quickly find anything on the like industry as I quickly look at that. Committee members, do we have any further questions? We have Assembly Member De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again for your presentation. Just a quick question. I know there was some conversation about social equity. Licenses. Have those been established?
Those have been distributed. There are currently 10 social equity consumption lounge licenses, but at this time, none of them are open.
Thank you so much. And I have a question, but I think it's going to be more appropriate for Department of Tax. Last session, one of the bills that I noticed wasn't in there is actually the Committee on Assembly Revenue had passed a bill to change the wholesale tax structure. And would that be better deferred to Department of Tax? I was just kind of curious if you guys may have any knowledge, if it's been successful. Are we seeing like more revenue being paid more timely? Are you hearing any issues that may be with that on your end?
Thank you for the question, Chair, and I don't want to punt to Director Hughes, but what I will say is I think that you can ask that, and I'm not going far, so I'm happy to come back up if they don't cover that in the presentation.
Sounds good. And one last question. I just want to make sure. I know with the, I asked this of our gaming control board with their licensees paying their revenue timely. I feel like last session there were a struggle between Department of Tax and our cannabis compliance with making sure that the taxpayers were paying tax because we had two different departments handling it. Have you found a way to make sure that that information is being readily shared between the two?
Thank you for the question, Chair, and I certainly hope Director Hughes would echo this, but I think that we have a pretty good relationship, and our departments frequently communicate on those specific issues, especially towards the end. It's typically the end of calendar year when a lot of the renewals come up, and then we coordinate and communicate with them quite a bit to make sure that the licensees have paid their taxes, so we know if they're able to renew them, if we're able to renew them.
That is good to hear. Okay, with that, I think we don't have any more questions from our committee members, and I really, truly appreciate you for your presentation, even giving it 5 times today.
Thank you, Chair. No, only twice today, but 5 in the last
twice
couple
today.
weeks.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. And with that, we will go ahead and move to our presentation from Department of Taxation. I understand we have some presenters here up in Carson City as well as a presenter down in Las Vegas. So whenever you are all set up and ready and want to begin, please feel free to do so.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Shelley Hughes, Executive Director for the Department of Taxation. I have with me today Yvonne Navarez-Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director, and Erica Scott is down in the south. She's our Economist 3. We will be presenting an overview of cannabis taxes today. Director Hum touched on some of this information in his presentation, but I will briefly go over it again. NRS 372.290, subsection 1 and 2, establishes an excise tax at the rate of 15% of the fair market value at wholesale of cannabis. The tax is the obligation of the cultivation facility and is levied on the first transfer of cannabis from a cultivation facility. The cultivation excise tax is due monthly on the last day of the month after the period ends. The wholesale cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the Cannabis Compliance Board. To provide you with some history regarding the cannabis tax, the medical cannabis tax was established by the legislature in the 2013 legislative session, and it became effective April 1st, 2014. The tax rate was 2% and was levied on each transfer by a medical cannabis cultivator, product manufacturer, and a dispensary. 75% of the tax revenue was distributed to the state distributive school account, and 25% was distributed to the Division of Public and Behavioral Health to pay the cost to carry out the provisions of NRS 453A. In 2017, the medical cannabis tax was eliminated, and the rate was changed from 2% to 15% and was imposed on sales or transfers of cannabis from cultivation facilities. At this time, the Department of Taxation regulated cannabis, and the tax revenue funded the cost of the department and local governments, with any remaining revenue being distributed to the state distributive account. In 2019, the Cannabis Compliance Board, or CCB, was created with Senate Bill 533, and CCB took over the regulation of cannabis. As a result, the distribution of the wholesale cannabis tax revenue changed from being distributed to the Department of Taxation to being distributed to CCB. In 2023, the wholesale cannabis tax was revised to be levied on the first initial wholesale sale at 15% of either the fair market value at wholesale for sales to an affiliate or the contracted sales price for sales to non-affiliates. NRS 372A 290 subsection 3 establishes an excise tax on the retail sale of cannabis and cannabis products by a retail cannabis store, a retail cannabis consumption lounge, and an independent cannabis consumption lounge at the rate of 10% of the sales price. Cannabis or cannabis products sold to a patient card holder are not subject to the 10% retail cannabis tax. The tax is the obligation of the adult use retail store, retail cannabis consumption lounge, and the independent cannabis consumption lounge, but may be recovered from the purchaser. Retail cannabis taxes are due monthly on the last day of the month after the period ends. The retail cannabis tax revenue is distributed to the State Education Fund. The retail cannabis tax was established in the 2017 legislative session. In 2019, the retail cannabis tax revenue was required to be distributed to the State Distributive School account. And then in 2021, the retail cannabis tax revenue was required to be distributed to the newly created State Education Fund. Sales tax is also due on retail sales of cannabis. Retail cannabis stores, retail cannabis consumption lounges, and independent cannabis consumption lounges must also file a monthly sales tax return That includes taxable sales for adult use cannabis and cannabis products, and taxable sales to patient card holders in addition to the cannabis excise tax return. As previously mentioned, NRS 372A.290 subsections 1 through 3 govern the imposition of a cannabis excise tax and the tax rate. In fiscal year '24, the wholesale cannabis tax revenue received by the department was $43,737,147. In fiscal year '24, the retail cannabis tax revenue received by the department was $76,800,162. In fiscal year '24, taxable sales reported by both adult use retail stores and medical dispensaries was $829,225,194. NRS 678A.480 subsection 1 provides authority to the department to conduct tax audits of cannabis licensees. A licensee shall make available to the department as applicable all books, accounts, claims, reports, vouchers, and other records requested by the department in connection with an audit. NRS 678A.480 subsection 5 requires the department, along with CCB, to submit to the director of LCB on or before April 1st of each year a report regarding the audits the agencies conducted the previous calendar year. Specifically, the report includes the number of audits performed, a summary of the findings of the audits, and the cost of each audit. NRS 372A.290 subsections 4 through 7 govern the distribution of cannabis tax revenue. In fiscal year 2024, the department distributed $43,737,147 to CCB from the wholesale cannabis tax. From that amount, CCB deducts its cost to support its regulatory oversight of the cannabis industry. CCB then distributes $5 million to local governments, and then the remaining amount is distributed to the state education fund. In fiscal year 2024, CCB distributed $31,079,460 to the state education fund. The department also distributed retail cannabis tax revenue to the state education fund in the amount of $76,800,162. I will now turn the presentation over to Chief Deputy Navarez Goodson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Yvonne Navarez Goodson, Chief Deputy Executive Director for the Department of Taxation. I would like to present a few slides regarding the role of the Department of Taxation in cannabis license renewals and transfers of interest. I will also provide an overview of Senate Bill 41 requiring cannabis tax permits, which will be presented to this committee later in the legislative session. Cannabis license renewals are governed by the Cannabis Compliance Board pursuant to NRS Chapter 678B, which calls for annual renewals of these licenses. Moreover, CCB Regulation 5.095 governs renewals and states that failure of a licensee to comply with the provisions of NRS Chapter 372A, which governs cannabis taxes, may result in the denial of a license or a renewal. Regarding timing, if a licensee has not renewed a license by the expiration date, the licensee must cease operations and has 90 days to renew the license, or it is deemed to have been voluntarily surrendered. By way of summary, CCB has existing regulations governing disciplinary actions that may impact licenses, including renewals. The CCB is currently undertaking efforts to adopt certain changes to these regulations, including those that impact duties regarding tax obligations with the Department of Taxation. Specifically, under existing CCB regulations, a licensee must operate with all required permits. They must pay taxes to the department and file monthly tax returns and sales reports or payments to the department. Failure to satisfy these tax obligations results in various categories of violations and resulting consequences, including potential suspension or revocation of the license. These violations would similarly impact renewals. The CCB is proposing to amend each of these violations related to its tax issues and create a new, less serious violation for failing timely to pay taxes or file returns. which penalties would decrease from civil penalties and potential suspension or revocation to written warnings, significantly decreased civil penalties, and minor suspensions. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.035, a person may become ineligible to receive, renew, or maintain a license to operate a cannabis establishment for operating without all required permits, intentionally failing to pay taxes to the department, or failing to properly collect taxes. Any of these violations are categorized as a Category 1 violation with significant civil penalties up to $90,000, a 30-day suspension, or ultimately revocation. Under the proposed revisions to this regulation, the violation for operating without a required permit would be moved to a Category 2 violation and include any tax permits. Such violation has decreased penalties from a Category 1 violation. Notably, the proposed revision to this regulation eliminates from a violation as a Category 1 or 2 violation the intentional failure to pay taxes and failure to properly collect taxes. Instead, as will be noted later in my presentation, the violation being eliminated would relate to intentional failure to pay taxes or properly collect taxes, which would then be categorized as a Category 7 violation with a much reduced penalty. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.050, a licensee may be deemed to be creating a threat to the public safety and welfare, including unintentionally failing to pay taxes to the department, resulting in a Category 3 violation, with a sliding scale of civil penalties and a sliding scale of a number of days of potential suspension and revocation for 5 or more violations within a 3-year period. Under proposed revisions to this regulation, Category 3 violations would become Category 4 violations, resulting in less severe penalties. However, the unintentional failure to pay taxes under this regulation would be removed from a Category 3 or 4 violation and again become part of the Category 7 violation with less severe penalties. Under existing CCB Regulation 4.060, a licensee may be deemed to be engaging in conduct inconsistent with the orderly regulation, sale, or production of cannabis, including failing to submit monthly tax or sales reports or payments, resulting in a Category 5 violation with a warning all the way to a sliding scale of civil penalties from $2,500 to $40,000 and a sliding scale number of days of potential suspension. Under the proposed revisions to this regulation, the Category 5 violations would become Category 6 violations, again resulting in less severe penalties, and once again, the failure to submit the monthly tax, sales reports, and payments would be removed from either of those categories and moved down to that Category 7 violation. As indicated, any prior regulations previously discussed resulting in various categories of violations for differing tax obligations that would have resulted in a higher category violation from CCB are all proposed to be amended and treated as a single streamlined category for failing timely to pay taxes or file returns as a Category 7 violation. Under this new Category 7 violation, the failure to timely pay taxes or file returns could result in much less severe violations to the licensee, including at least 2 formal written warnings followed by a sliding scale of civil penalties for the 3rd to 6th violations between $1,500 and $10,000 with no suspensions, or $20,000 and a 10-day suspension for a 7th or subsequent violation. Under the new Category 7 violation, failure to pay taxes would not result in revocation of a license. Under this next slide, I would like to touch briefly on what is becoming more commonplace activity for cannabis licensees, which is the transfer of interest of these licenses. NRS 678B.380 provides that licenses are not transferable except as provided by regulation of this Cannabis Compliance Board. CCB's regulations 5.110 and 5.112 provide the requirements for transferring all or a portion of ownership of interest in a cannabis business. The Department of Taxation becomes involved in these transfers of interest when there is an outstanding tax liability by a person or entity seeking to transfer its license. Most often, this occurs around the time of renewal. As indicated above, for a license to be renewed, the licensee must be timely on their tax obligations. In accordance therewith, if a person or entity seeks a transfer, the department may enter into a conditional transfer of interest with the licensee and with CCB to ensure that the payment of all outstanding excise taxes through the sale or transfer of any proceeds, including requiring those proceeds from the sale or transfer to be put in escrow for the department to accomplish that transfer. In these conditional transfers of interest, the department reserves its right to pursue responsible persons and successor liability on outstanding tax liabilities for non-payment through these agreements. It is in the interest of the licensee to pay the outstanding tax obligation to settle the debt to allow for the renewal of the license, or alternatively, to transfer the interest to a new owner. Turning now to an overview of Senate Bill 41, which will be presented to the committee at a future date, I wanted to provide a highlight of the intention of this bill. This bill would require sellers of cannabis and cannabis product to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the department in addition to a seller's permit as applicable. As provided earlier in my presentation regarding renewals of licenses, a licensee must maintain all required permits for renewal of a license. A cannabis business again, must renew its license on an annual basis with the Cannabis Compliance Board, and to qualify for renewal of the license, the business must be current with its cannabis tax obligations with the Department of Taxation, including filing returns and remitting payments. Business entities may enter into a payment plan under certain circumstances to pay these outstanding tax liabilities. At times, cannabis businesses fail to submit required tax returns or pay the tax liability owed to the state. Alternatively, we have cannabis businesses that will enter into a payment plan with the department in order to renew their license with CCB and default on the payment plan immediately thereafter. Upon renewal of the CCB license, that business is allowed to operate for another year and may continue to accumulate huge debt to the state. The department has no ability to stop the tax liability from continuing to accrue for another year after the CCB license has been renewed. And many cannabis businesses have ended up going into receivership, and the state loses out on this revenue. By requiring a cannabis business to obtain a cannabis tax permit from the Department of Taxation to operate in Nevada, the department could have a role in protecting the state's revenue outside of the annual renewal process with CCB. More specifically, by requiring cannabis businesses to obtain the cannabis tax permit from the department to operate in Nevada, the department can initiate a hearing for suspension or revocation of the permit with an administrative law judge when a business becomes non-compliant with any of its tax obligations. The business entity may appeal an adverse decision of the hearing officer to the Nevada Tax Commission, and any adverse decision of the Tax Commission would be subject to judicial review. If the hearing decision or decision of the Tax Commission, as applicable, supports revocation or suspension, the bill would provide for automatic suspension of the cannabis license by CCB to prevent the business from continuing to operate and establishing more debt to the state. However, if the business comes into compliance with the department, CCB will lift the suspension. The business must pay the full tax liability or enter into a payment plan to pay the full tax liability or it may enter into a payment plan to pay that tax liability before it may petition for judicial review. That requirement is consistent with petitions for judicial review of any other commission decision pursuant to NRS 360.395. The process would be similar to the state sales tax permit process. However, the department would not charge a fee for this cannabis tax permit. With that, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to our economist, Erica Scott, who's in Southern Nevada, to continue our presentation.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. This is Erica Scott, for the record, economist with the Department of Taxation, and I'll be discussing the fair market value. The fair market value is the median sales price for wholesale sales between cannabis cultivation facilities and cannabis establishments that are not affiliates, often referred to as arm's length transactions. The fair market value calculation was prepared by the Department of Taxation semi-annually in the past, but beginning January 1st of 2023, this process was changed to a quarterly calculation. In addition, taxation has implemented a process to post their fair market value memo around the middle of the month prior to the effective date for industry to be able to view. And fair market value is posted to the Department of Taxation's website at tax.nv.gov. The data used on the next slide, the data used to calculate fair market value is obtained directly from the state seed to sale tracking system called Metric. These are transactions reported in Metric directly by the cannabis industry. In the past, taxation used a transfer report called the General Wholesale Transfer Initial First Report, which details all first initial wholesale sales of cannabis as input by industry. But beginning January 1st of 2024, upon passage of Assembly Bill 430, the non-affiliate wholesale transfer initial first metric report was created and able to be used, which distinctly pulls out those non-affiliate wholesale transactions. Each quarter, the fair market value, along with the summary statistics, is published on the department's website. However, it is possible to request additional information regarding fair market value calculations and methodology by submitting a public records request form found on the department's website, but keeping in mind that no request, which includes identifying taxpayer information, would be granted pursuant to NRS 360.255. On the next slide, I'd like to review the department's methodology for calculating the fair market value. So first step, we pull the data directly from Metric via the non-affiliate wholesale transfer report, as stated earlier. The report dates used are for the prior completed 3 months of business transactions. So for example, the January 1st of 2025 calculation was completed in the month of December and consisted of transactions from September 1st, 2024 through November 30th, 2024. The second step is the data cleaning, in which any transaction that was not in an accepted status by the purchaser is eliminated from the data set. All packages with the status of rejected or returned or still showing shipped status for longer than 3 business days are all eliminated, and only those transactions with an accepted status are used. Also eliminated from the data set are transactions of samples, testers, displays, all typically called penny transactions, R&D transactions, tribal, and any known affiliate transactions that may have been inadvertently transferred as non-affiliate. Essentially, any transactions that would be not considered a normal arm's length transaction is what we use in the data set. So then step 3 is we separate the categories. There are 8 fair market value cannabis categories, which is flower, trim, small bud, whole wet plant, immature plants, pre-rolls, flower approved for extraction, and trim approved for extraction. The next step is to standardize the price by weight. For each cannabis category, we add a column to divide the shipped dollar amount by the weight shipped for all categories, except for immature plant category, as this category is in units and not by pound. So we, for flower, trim, small bud, wet whole plants, pre-rolls, flower approved for extraction and trim approved for extraction are all valued by the pound, while only immature plants are valued by the individual unit. And then step 5 is to remove any remaining outliers, which we do this by removing any standardized price per pound that is less than 15% of the previous fair market value or more than 500% of the previous fair market value. And that is the idea that sales made for less than 15% of the previous fair market value are being made for less than the tax due on the product, and as such are not typical arm's length transactions, and sales made for more than 500% of the previous fair market value are likely special cases or keying errors that should not impact the fair market value determination. Step 6 is we run the descriptive statistics on each cannabis category using the data analysis tool PAC. And we include the standardized price. We run the descriptive statistics on the standardized price field and include the summary statistics. So finally, we determine the new fair market value by determining the median sales price from the summary statistics on each cannabis category after all of the prior adjustments of the data have been made. The department prepares the memo and posts it to the website. And the department's goal has been to publish the new fair market value rates by mid-month prior to the effective date in an attempt to give as much advance notice as possible to cannabis industry before the new fair market value is effective. And with that, we conclude the presentation by providing the department's contact information along with our very helpful website, tax.nv.gov. And we thank you for your time allowing us to present today and are available for any questions.
Thank you so much. I didn't know if Director Hughes or anyone else was going to speak afterwards, but I truly appreciate your presentation. I'll go ahead and take questions from our members, but I just had a couple questions because obviously there were some things that were kind of raised with respect to, it sounds like I'm trying to understand the genesis of SB 41. It sounds like it is sought as a tool by the Department of Taxation in collecting revenue. And so I know in other presentations, the department is able to assess like amounts that are outstanding in tax revenue. I know we have some data from FY24. One, I guess the first question would be, do you have an idea of what is outstanding revenue on the books?
Shelley Hughes for the record. So we do run a report monthly by the 20th of the month that provides outstanding tax liabilities for all the cannabis licensees. I don't have that information with me, but Erica Scott, our economist, may have that information on the total amount that's outstanding.
Yes, thank you, Chair Backus. This is Erica Scott for the record. I do have the outstanding accounts receivable through Q1 of FY25 is about $15.4 million in the wholesale cannabis tax. And for the retail cannabis tax for that same quarter was $672.8 thousand. We had actually collected some from the prior AR report.
And Ms. Scott, just to clarify that was slightly over 672,000, and that's, I assume, for the retail?
Retail, yes, correct. Sorry.
Thank you for that. And I know when we brought AB 430, some of the hardship issues for wholesalers was the aspect that they have to pay revenue without actually being paid. So they were like fronting the expenses when they weren't having the cash on hand. And so my next question is going to kind of change a little. With respect to, I guess you do know this because people timely filing their returns, and it's obviously the payments that are going to come in a little later or still outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Erica Scott for the record. I believe I would have to look into more details on where that accounts receivable amount is made up, as it does get broken out into different areas of delinquency.
And then kind of shifting directions back to kind of the AB 430 that became effective January 1st, 2024. And we were able to see in the prior presentation a shift between fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24. I know that's not a full picture because of the implementation of AB 430 going into effect January 1st, kind of halfway through that fiscal year, even though I do know some wholesalers who may have held off in doing transactions until after that point in time. But since then, I know we don't have a full fiscal year 25 picture. Do you think you're going to see a huge decrease on the wholesale product, the wholesale tax, the excise tax being collected for fiscal year 25?
Thank you, Chair. Erica Scott for the record. Based on the fair market value that we've published, it does look like the tax rates on those fair market values are coming in quite increasingly. And so we would see that the wholesale cannabis tax revenue would be affected by that. By what percentage at this point is based upon the bill that was passed last session. I couldn't point distinctly to that, but roughly when I'm evaluating fair market value, there's roughly about 65% that are non-affiliate transactions, and or anywhere from 65 to 70%, and then 30 to 35% roughly of affiliate transactions. So we would assume to see that those transactions sold at lower rates.
Thank you for that. Members, does anyone have any questions for Department of Taxation? I'll go to Assemblymember Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. First of all, did you say that 15 million in arrears from cultivators? Did I hear that right?
Thank you for Erica Scott for the record. Yes, 15.4 million in wholesale cannabis tax.
So what's the discrepancy between retail and the wholesale and the, I'm sorry, why am I blanking on this? Cultivation, sorry.
So Erica Scott for the record, I would have to let compliance team answer more to that, I believe. In general, the retail cannabis tax is collected from the consumer at the end, but a wholesale cannabis tax prior to AB 430.
Right, I understand. We wrote this law. I get this. So it looks like there's this like very heavy burden on cultivators, which makes it very difficult for them to pay this, if I'm seeing this appropriately. And then I was also looking at your, sorry, do you mind if am I okay? Okay, great. So I'm also looking at like that there's this heavy burden on the cultivators. So let me ask this question first. Like how many cultivations have gone into receivership or transfer licenses that were outstanding due to the taxes owed? Do we know that statistic?
Shelley Hughes for the record. I'm not sure if Director Hum would have that information available right now.
Go need a friend.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember. Don't have that information on us, but we'd be happy to provide it.
To provide it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so now I'm going to switch over to the fair market. Like that looks very confusing. Okay. But one of the things that I did see is it seems like it is a trailing indicator because you guys are basing this on like the year prior. And I don't know if maybe we could learn from Zillow when they were buying up houses. Their algorithm is also a trailing indicator and they were losing. And so, I mean, they were going to go bankrupt if they continued. So they stopped buying houses because their algorithm wasn't good. So I'm wondering if there was some appetite to kind of look at finding something a little bit more fair and reasonable that's like an actual picture in time of what the actual cannabis product is worth or being sold at the time. I like the good old adage of supply and demand. Yeah.
Shelley Hughes for the record. So with AB 430, we did change the time. So the earliest that we would be able to look at those records would be the 3 months prior to us issuing the fair market value. So, and as Erica mentioned in the presentation, we were doing it semi-annually. Now we're doing it quarterly.
And it's about $1,200 a pound right now, is what I heard. 12 something and change.
I will defer to Erica. This is Shelley Hughes for the record. Erica puts together our fair market value, so I think she could answer that question.
Yes, thank you. It is $1,296 a pound.
$1,290.
That is for the flower category of cannabis.
Okay, and how much are they as the actual sale of the product? Does anybody know that? Like, how much are the cultivators actually selling it to retail for? Are they actually selling it for $12.96 a pound, or are they selling it for more or less?
Shelley Hughes for the record. That information is all put into metric, and so that goes into Erica's calculations to determine the fair market value. So it depends on if they're an affiliate or a non-affiliate, and what records what amounts they put into metric. Erica could elaborate further if I'm not correctly stating that.
Yes, thank you. Erica Scott for the record. Yes, that median price is of the non-affiliate transactions that the industry themselves has put into the system of metric, saying that that's their sales price.
Okay, but that's the median. So sometimes it could be sold for $600, maybe it's sold for $400, it could be $1,000, maybe it's $1,500. Like, it could be across the board, correct? Okay, thank you.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Members, do we have any other further questions? Because I may have some more. Okay. So when we're going with because obviously we have a situation where, when I was hearing from our gaming licensees, I think Chair Hendricks was like $1,000 outstanding in AR, and he almost wrote a check for it. I'm like, no, I think this is like amazing that you only have $1,000 in AR on the gaming establishment's payment of licensee fees or their sort of revenue that they have to pay. And I get the policy struggles for our cultivators, but we're sitting at a $15.4 million in accounts receivable. That's revenue that needs to go obviously into our state's education fund. And my question on that, do we know, do we have an aging report that we could look back to see how old this accounts receivable is on the books? Ms. Scott, I don't know if you have that info.
Yes, Chair, thank you for the question. I'd have to pull up that actual report, and unfortunately, my laptop battery just failed, and do not have that in front of me, but we can get that for you, for sure.
That would be great. I would love to take a look at that, and because I have a feeling that's been on the books probably for some time. It's not recent, but I was kind of trying to compare it with the change in the regulations that lightened up, holding licensees at stake if they don't pay their state revenue. Just kind of looking at that, I just wanted to see if there was any correlation or if it's just been something that's been on the books even before that's been a struggle. I know our wholesalers, I listened to them, I understood when we brought AB 430 was because of the stress is trying to alleviate they have to pay out taxes on money they have yet received, and it's just how the structure is, how we wrote the bill. So I would really like to see that. Anything else, members? Anyone else have any questions? With that, I think I appreciate both CCB and Department of Taxes presentations today, and hopefully we can figure a way to fix this so it's somehow fair to everybody. But anyway, with that, we'll go ahead and excuse our wonderful Department of Tax, and we can move on to our last agenda item, which is public comment. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas wanting to give public comment this evening? Okay, we'll go up to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give public comment this evening? AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give? Oh, you have public comment? Oh, sorry, I apologize. Carson City, I said Las Vegas twice then. Feel free, if you have public comment this evening, you can come forward, sir.
Lance Gotchi. So you heard what I said, and so that you like me, I've swum across Pyramid Lake 5 times out of 10 attempts and tried Tahoe twice, made it over halfway. And so, sociologically speaking, you know, you're doing the marijuana nuts and bolts. But the young people who don't have a solid family, like foster kids and all that, they grow up and they turn 17, they have to smoke cigarettes and marijuana, and a lot of them die of fentanyl now because they have to be in a group and be popular. And so the system takes advantage of them. They're charging all this tax money for a pack of cigarettes. And now you're doing the marijuana and making money off them now. A lot of them have a lot of money. For marijuana and cigars, you know, the older people with money do that. Thank you for having me speak and explain the sociology of, it's too bad that the wealthy people make money off the young who do as I said. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, AVH, we'll go to the phone lines for public comment this evening.
The public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
With that, I can go ahead and close our hearing this evening.